The People Farm, Chapter 1, the two teachings. If we can gather over here to the left, I have two documents I wish to show you. The first of these is this book by Peter Demianovich Ouspensky. It's called In Search of the Miraculous, and it was published in 1950. From this time onwards, anyone with a bit of cash in their pocket could go out and buy this book and read it. They would then know what it was that Ouspensky was teaching. Prior to this, no one really knew what Ouspensky was teaching. Although fragments of this book were read aloud at Ouspensky's fortnightly meetings in London from 1921 to 1941, in general, this book was not available even to Ouspensky's pupils. The second document is this book by George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, entitled The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. This book was published in 1950. It was published under the title Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. We use here the Saxon genitive, placing the name Beelzebub first in the title, which creates a false impression that this is a book about Beelzebub. It's not. It is about the tales of Beelzebub. And this distinction becomes important later on. The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson was published in 1950. Prior to this, no one knew what Gurdjieff was teaching. From 1950 onwards, anyone with enough cash in his pocket could buy this book and read it. They would then know what it was that Gurdjieff was teaching. These two books are very important. Both were published in 1950. From then on, they could be bought by anyone and could be read by them. It could therefore then be known what Ouspensky was teaching and also what Gurdjieff was teaching. These are the two documents that I'm going to use here. I've been interested in Ouspensky's teaching and Gurdjieff's teaching for over 50 years. For the first 20 years or so of that time, I was concerned with what we call the Gurdjieff tradition. This is what was presented as if it was Gurdjieff's teaching, but this comes from Ouspensky. What I am going to say here, and the reason that I introduce these two documents, is that there are actually two completely different teachings associated with or attributed to Gurdjieff. The first is this Gurdjieff tradition. This is what was being taught prior to 1950 and from 1950 as if it was Gurdjieff's teaching. Even after 1950, when these two books had both been published. Now I suggest that this Gurdjieff tradition comes essentially from this book, In Search of the Miraculous, by Ouspensky. And it comes from Ouspensky's teaching in London from 1921 to 1941. Ouspensky died in London in 1947, and then this book was published posthumously in 1950. Only then could anyone interested know what it was that Ouspensky was teaching. Prior to 1950, it was not known what it was that Ouspensky was teaching. Ouspensky's pupils attended fortnightly meetings in London, which were question and answer sessions. Talks and readings were given. For a few lucky ones, there was the chance to augment this with weekend practical work. But the book In Search of the Miraculous was not available to them. They did not know what Ouspensky was teaching. And from this a tradition has arisen which I call the Gurdjieff tradition. What I came to realize in reading this book, and from reading also and in parallel Gurdjieff's own book, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson, was that these two books, and hence these two teachings, are completely different. This took place perhaps about 1990 and was made possible by the fact that these two books were published in 1950. I emphasize this fact, don't I? Prior to 1990, in my studies, I had assumed that the Gurdjieff tradition, which I suggest here comes essentially from Ouspensky and from the book In Search of the Miraculous, could somehow be found embedded or even deliberately hidden in Gurdjieff's own book, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. But of course, it isn't. There are two completely different teachings associated with the name of Gurdjieff. There is the Gurdjieff tradition coming from Ouspensky, and there is Gurdjieff's own teaching coming from his own book, published in 1950, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. These two books are completely different teachings. I think this is an important realization, and this difference between these two books and these two teachings constitutes the theme here that I am exploring. By comparing these two books, comparing these two teachings, finding everywhere and at every level the differences between them, and by examining these differences, we come to understand in a much more profound way the significance of these two teachings. This is what I am talking and writing about here. There is a Gurdjieff tradition that comes from Ouspensky, which is totally different from Gurdjieff's own teachings, as Gurdjieff has written them down in his book, The Tales of Beelzebub to His Grandson. Your questions are important, and you will now be asking me, well, what are these teachings about? Why are these two teachings in any way connected? And so, let me explain the overall theme of what I am saying. This is not explicit either in Ouspensky's teaching nor Gurdjieff's. It is my question. Why should we consider the teachings of Ouspensky? Why should we consider the teachings of Gurdjieff? I introduce this by posing my question, a question which I consider the fundamental background not only to Gurdjieff's teaching nor Ouspensky's, but to our own lives in general. It is a big question. It is this: is it possible for the ordinary man or woman in the course of their lives to develop in some way? That is the start of the question. And it goes on. Is it possible for the ordinary man or woman in the course of their lives excuse me. Is it oh dear. I got this bit out. Is it possible for the ordinary man or woman in the course of their lives to develop in some way, and if so, what is it in them that develops, and how? Let me read that again, because I'm suffering here. Is it possible for the ordinary man or woman in the course of their lives to develop in some way, And if so, what is it in them that develops and how? This is the question I take as central to my writings, which follow as I explore the differences between the two teachings that I claim are attributed to Gurdjieff, the Gurdjieff tradition coming from Ouspensky, and Gurdjieff's own teaching expressed in his own writings in the book The Tales of Beelzebub to his grandson. Initially, therefore, you will understand is that there are two completely opposite answers to this question posed by me. If we take the Gurdjieff tradition, the teaching ascribed to Gurdjieff and taught as if it is Gurdjieff's teaching, but which actually comes from Ouspensky, and in particular from Ouspensky's teaching in London from 1921 to 1941, and from this book In Search of the Miraculous. There are those in the Gurdjieff tradition who will claim that Gurdjieff's teaching, as expressed in this tradition, cannot be explained, cannot be defined. This is not true. The Gurdjieff tradition teaches that yes, it is possible for men and women to develop in the course of their lives by means of work upon oneself. And further, that this development is the development in them of their consciousness, in the sense of consciousness of self. This work upon oneself consists of efforts made by them under the guidance of a teacher, and these efforts are primarily psychological and physical tasks. If we then look at what Gurdjieff himself writes, then it is this, that there is no possibility at all for the ordinary man or woman to develop in any way in the course of their lives. Any efforts made to do so do not work and only make their situation worse. We have fallen to such a low, energetic level that we are forced to create in ourselves, at this low level, a false self, which is a false, fictitious and unreal conscious mind, and as such, being false, fictitious and unreal, cannot develop in any way. This is the result of an energetic situation, and our psychology as ordinary men and women is a consequence of a cause, and the cause is our depleted and hence very low energetic state. Gurdjieff goes on to explain that therefore, before any individual development can begin, we must remedy this situation, this energetic situation, by means of a transformation which will raise the whole energetic state of the organism to a new and higher level. Only once this transformation has taken place and we are established in a new and much higher energetic level, only then can our own individual development begin. Gurdjieff's teaching was therefore about this transformation. Well, it is fundamental to Gurdjieff's writings that there are two completely different situations possible on the earth, and these are both acceptable. It doesn't make any difference to what I think is referred to in the book by Ouspensky, In Search of the Miraculous, is referred to as great nature. It doesn't matter objectively which of these situations arises. However, for human beings it's crucial because there are two situations. We are living on the earth, organic life in general and human beings in particular, to provide energies that feed the moon and maintain the Earth and the moon as a unit, so that the Earth and the moon, an abnormal situation that has arisen by accident, does not threaten the rest of the universe. So we are living on the Earth to maintain the Earth-Moon complex so that it doesn't threaten the rest of the universe. So that's why we're here. And we can be here in two different ways. This is Gurdjieff's teaching. The first way is we live on the Earth as if animals. And we maintain the moon because when we die, there are energies that are released, that have animated us, that pass to the moon, to maintain the moon. So this is what is called by Gurdjieff in his writings, Itoklanoz. I don't know why he's called it that, but that's it. It has a sort of clockwise sound, Itoklanoz. It's just, that's the way it is. We live like animals. When we die, we produce the energies that are necessary for the maintenance of the moon. And this is all to ensure the stability and the security of the rest of the universe. Now the second way of living, which Gurdjieff writes about in his book, he calls it Furaznitanian. This is a completely different way of living. This is the way that genuine human beings should live. This is the way genuine three-brain beings should live. And it is a situation in which they live at a higher energetic level than we do now. We are living in this first system. We are just living like animals. We are living like something. The universe that we see, that scientists study, is just the excrement, as it were, of the universe, the excrement of processes going on in the universe. And we live in that and maintain that, in a sense, for the security of the rest of the universe. That's all we are. We're like bacteria in shit. That's our lives. That's the way we are at the moment. So, but there is another way, and this is what Gurdjieff is talking about. Because if we live at the level of animals, as we do, energies necessary for the maintenance of the moon are released only when we die. So it's desirable there are lots of people, and lots of people die. However, Gurdjieff is saying there is a different way, and this is the way of living. We raise ourselves, raise the whole organism up to a new energetic level. And at that new energetic level, higher energetic level, as human beings, we can produce the energies necessary in the course of our lives for the maintenance of the moon. So that we can produce these energies whilst we are living. And it's not necessary for us, as it were, to die so often. Even when we die, those energies that animate us pass to the moon. But we can also produce those energies whilst we are living. And therefore, this will lead on the Earth, for us, in this remote corner of the universe, this will lead to a much more stable situation for us. We can create a paradise on Earth in which we can live. But we must produce, by our activities within this paradise on the Earth, we must produce the energies necessary for the maintenance of the moon. I stress that this is Gurdjieff's teaching, as written down in his book, The Tales of Beelzebub to his grandson. So we have two situations. One, we live simply at the animal level. We die, energies pass to the moon, maintain the moon, for the security of the rest of the universe. The second situation, we can create, by means of activities, work upon ourselves, being part good duty, as Gurdjieff says, conscious labours and intentional suffering, we produce the energies during the course of our lives necessary for the maintenance of the moon. In addition, and this allows us, it makes our existence on the earth desirable because we are producing the energies necessary for the maintenance of the moon. Now, in addition, and this is the key thing that Gurdjieff points out in his book, The Tales of Beelzebub, to his grandson, whilst we are performing this being part Kadolg duty, producing the energies necessary, or releasing at least the energies necessary for the maintenance of the moon, we are also producing two other energies at a very high level, which complete and perfect us, our higher being bodies, as Gurdjieff writes, and as Beelzebub says in this book. We can perfect ourselves, develop ourselves and perfect ourselves using the energies also released by this activity of being part Kadolg duty. So being part Kadolg duty during the course of our lives reduces an energy called Askokin, which is food for the moon, during the course of our lives, which animals can't do, and which ordinary men and women can't do. But we can raise our energetic level to such a level, a higher level, at which we can produce a skokin during the course of our lives for the maintenance of the moon. This is what we're here for the security of the rest of the universe. But the bonus for us is at the same time we release energies that we ourselves as individuals use to perfect and develop our higher being bodies, perfect ourselves at a higher level, to acquire what would be, in our terminology, we would term immortality, with our concepts of time, which are so naive, it's unbelievable. But we can perfect ourselves at a higher level, develop ourselves and perfect ourselves at a higher level, using energies also released by this process. So if I put it in simple terms, we either live on the earth in a sense as animals and just follow our instincts, and that's it. What we enjoy, what we don't enjoy, we avoid. And we produce Askokin for the moon when we die. So lots of people on the earth, lots of people die. Born and death. Does this look familiar in the modern world? With 7 billion people on the earth and all sorts of events going on. Or, Gurdjieff is saying, we can raise ourselves as individuals to a higher level. And at this higher level, we can work on ourselves, we can perform being part Kadolg duty, conscious labours and intentional suffering, and we can release this Askokin in the course of our lives. So there is the incentive to great nature, the universe at large, to allow us to live much longer, and not just en masse, and dying en masse, born en masse, dying en masse. That there is the encouragement that we actually can live on the earth and produce a skokin for the moon. And we can create a paradise on earth. It only takes 20 or 30 years at the most, with the knowledge we've got now. If everyone was in this, had this possibility of raising their energetic level, which we do have. So we could live on the earth, perform our functions on the earth, produce a skokin for the moon, and live in a paradise on earth. And by working on ourselves, being part Kadolg duty, release the energies necessary both for the maintenance of the moon, Askokin, and the energies necessary for the development of each of us as individuals, our higher parts, our higher being bodies. We can complete and perfect those using Helkdonis and Ablustdonis, other energies released during this process. So this is why Gurdjieff's teaching is a little bit, in a sense, unbelievable, because it actually fits together rather well and explains our situation. We are living at the animal level, just masses of people born, masses of people die, and we maintain the moon for the security of the rest of the universe. The rest of the universe is not bothered how this happens. They're secure, they're safe, they're living in their paradise, their world. But Gurdjieff says there's another way of doing it. We could be living in a paradise on earth. Because there is the possibility of us raising our overall energetic level as individuals and releasing the energies necessary for the maintenance of the moon during the course of our lives. Hence, an incentive to live longer and longer and longer, as used to happen. And at the same time, release energies that we can then use as individuals, each of us as individuals, to attain what we would see from our perspective here on earth as immortality. Each of us as individuals. And this is what Gurdjieff is, the picture that Gurdjieff is presenting in the book, The Tales of Beelzebub, to his grandson. Okay, does that answer your question? That's the picture I'm presenting, my interpretation, and in fact, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is what Gurdjieff is saying. Well, I can't stress too highly this point. The point at which, the way in which, let me try and get my thoughts clear, the way in which Ouspensky has misunderstood and misinterpreted Gurdjieff, and hence the tradition, which I call the Gurdjieff tradition, coming from Ouspensky, misunderstands and misinterprets what Gurdjieff was teaching. This Gurdjieff tradition is not Gurdjieff's teaching at all. Now, what was Gurdjieff teaching? We've fallen to such a low energetic level that we are trapped in internal structures from which we cannot escape. So we have an abnormal psychology. In what way is our psychology abnormal? Well, Gurdjieff said self-observation. Was it New York? Something like that, 1924. Self-observation is enough in the beginning. Do not try anything else. Self-observation is enough for several years. Do not try anything else. And he was explicit. We are trying to observe ourselves, self-observation, to come to the conclusion that we can't do it. So we must try and try and try to come to the conclusion that we can't do it. So that's Gurdjieff's teaching. He doesn't say then, go on and on and on, trying to observe yourself, and eventually you will be able to do it, because this is not true. Within the context of self-observation, he taught self-remembering. Try to remember yourself whilst you are observing yourself. Well, we can't do it. So we've got to try and try and try to come to this realization that we can't do it. Why can't we do it? Gurdjieff was explicit. We come to the conclusion that we must remember ourselves because we've tried and tried and tried and can't do it. We come to the conclusion that we must remember ourselves, but we can remember ourselves only if we have in ourselves the energies for self-remembering. So he doesn't say go on and on and on trying to remember yourself and you will develop and you will eventually be able to remember yourself. This is not true. We must have in ourselves the energies for self-remembering. We've fallen to such a low energetic level that we can't remember ourselves, just as we can't observe ourselves. Gurdjieff said you can try. You can try, he said. Not to immediately manifest when you experience an unpleasant emotion. Try and try and try not to manifest, not to swear when you experience an unpleasant emotion. This has become a whole teaching on negative emotions in the Gurdjieff tradition, which is not what Gurdjieff was teaching. We try and try and try not to manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion, to come to the realization that we can't do it. Why can't we do it? We come to the realization that we must not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion. But we can only not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion if we have the energies in us not to manifest when we experience an unpleasant emotion. Gurdjieff's teaching is about the energies, and we can't change our psychology. We have this abnormal psychology. We can't observe ourselves, we can't remember ourselves, we can't not manifest when we experience an unpleasant emotion. This is abnormal. Why? Because we don't have the energies for these things. So once we realise this, we realise that we can't develop these qualities, these normal qualities that we should have, by efforts on our part, by trying to observe ourselves, by trying to remember ourselves, by all the other tasks that are part of the Gurdjieff tradition. Ouspensky was teaching psychology as if we can change our psychology by psychological means. But that's not what Gurdjieff was teaching, and it's not what Gurdjieff said. If you read the book In Search of the Miraculous, Ouspensky records very exactly what Gurdjieff said. And we can paraphrase this, we can say, we come to the conclusion that we must observe ourselves. But we can observe ourselves only if we have in ourselves the energies for self-observation. Explicitly, we come to the conclusion that we must remember ourselves. But we can remember ourselves only if we have in ourselves the energies for self-remembering. Not try to remember yourself and you will eventually be able to do it. This doesn't work. It's not true, and it's not what Gurdjieff was teaching. We come to the conclusion that we must not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion. But we can only not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion if we have the energies in us to not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion. So then, once we realise this, then there is another teaching. This is Gurdjieff's teaching, and it is about the energies, which are the cause of our depleted energetic state and our abnormal psychology. And Gurdjieff is then explicit. Where do these energies come from? Ouspensky records exactly where they come from. The food of impressions. Coming from perception. Whereas Ouspensky was speaking of a first conscious shock, we must try to remember ourselves and it will create a first conscious shock. This is not what Gurdjieff taught. Perception. We don't perceive the world as we should. We don't receive the food of impressions as we should. And therefore we live in a depleted energetic state. The first food diagram that apparently Gurdjieff gave to Ouspensky, and Ouspensky records for us. So it's about energies. The energies are the cause of our psychological situation. So what's the answer? Gurdjieff says, raise the whole energetic level, our whole energetic level of the organism, to a new energetic level, and then our psychology will change. Then we will be able, because we have the energies in us, to observe ourselves as we should be able to do. Then we will have the energies in us to be able to remember ourselves. Then we will have the energies in us to not manifest immediately when we experience an unpleasant emotion. So Ouspensky has completely misunderstood and misinterpreted Gurdjieff, and this has led to a Gurdjieff tradition, what is being taught now as Gurdjieff's teaching, which is completely false. It's not Gurdjieff's teaching. And I think from what I've said, you can understand why it's not Gurdjieff's teaching. Gurdjieff's teaching is about energies. Energies are the cause. Our psychology is the effect, and you can't change the effect. You can't change our psychology by psychological means. You've got to change the psychology by energetic means. Not by efforts on our part to do these things that we can't do, but by changing our energetic situation. And that all comes from perception. We don't perceive the world as we should. We don't receive the food of impressions as we should. And we live, hence, in a depleted energetic state with an abnormal psychology in which we can't, under any circumstances, observe ourselves. We can't remember ourselves. We can't not manifest when we experience an unpleasant emotion, and so on. And these cannot be remedied by psychological means. That is to say, they're not remedied by efforts on our part. They are remedied by a change in our energetic level, which comes from perception. So we start a new teaching that looks at perception. It's that simple.